And we are recording. Are you ready for this?
Bottom text.
Bottom text. Two Fools presents Bottom Text. Okay, so for those of you just tuning in and those of you watching the stream or the YouTube video, what we're going to be doing today is a comprehensive review of Aimhyr lore and what happened, what went down in the Grand Quest, breaking down those pieces of lore into understandable chunks, because I know that a lot of people just click the skip button on the cutscenes so they can get their rewards.
Yes, that is the fastest way to get your rewards, and then have no idea why you got them. Exactly.
So, I guess we should start with a breakdown of what this is going to look like, because I know that Faf and I talked about this, but obviously you guys weren't privy to it. But this episode is going to be a very short backstory on what's actually needed to understand what happened in Aimhyr, mostly in terms of Juno and Ensa. That very short backstory, and then diving into the actual events and the character breakdowns.
Yeah, there isn't really too much to discuss about any of the other characters before that point, though we can briefly get into Sero-Anya and Nan's backstory.
Yeah.
Although it's really, really short.
Yeah, I think that we'll start with, I don't really think Nan's background is too important, but we can give, a mini explanation of that once we get there. I think we should start by explaining the relationship between Juno and Ensa.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So, Juno was brought into being on another plane of existence, separate from Aimhyr, where she brought life there. She had some humans, she had some animals, she had lots of plants. She just generally lived a pretty good life. She gained a pretty good knowledge of the cosmos as well. And then one day, everything changed when the Ravaging Void attacked and started eating worlds and stars and stuff that Juno saw on her map. And just eventually it came for her and it attacked her world. She managed to open a portal and get all of her people and animals over into the Vale in Aimhyr so Sero-Anya could take care of them, and also gave Sero-Anya a seed. And then she proceeded to die.
Yeah. You mind if I take over?
Sure.
So, at this point, basically what Juno is doing is holding back the Ravaging Void to give Sero-Anya and her people time to escape to the Vale. And the way that it's explained in Juno's lore is that she literally created a barrier of light to hold back the dark, right? So she's holding back this huge, powerful assault from the Ravaging Void. Everyone escapes, and as Juno is being overwhelmed by the Ravaging Void, and Fafnir is going to love this, she gives Sero-Anya her seed.
Yeah.
She literally tosses to Sero-Anya something called the Divine Seed, which we don't know what it does at that very instant, but as we see Juno get devoured by the Ravaging Void, the portal to Aimhyr closes. And Sero-Anya essentially has this Divine Seed, which she plants. She plants the seed, and immediately it begins to blossom into this huge, beautiful flower, and out comes Juno-Seto.
Immediately?
Well, not immediately.
No, it grows there for eons.
I don't think it's eons, but I believe it was sometime.
Let me look up Juno's Omnilore real quick.
Oh,
Omnilore. Because I remember this thing taking a long time.
I thought it was relatively fast, but I could be completely incorrect, and I don't dare question Fafnir's lore knowledge. So
let me find Juno's lore. Where is her Omnilore? I am way too far back.
I'll keep going.
There she is.
Oh, sorry. There you go. You can just go ahead. How long it do take?
The Divine Seed by the refugees performed rites. It took several generations.
There you go.
So it wasn't eons, but it was
a long
a few hundred years.
Yeah, so after a few hundred years, basically this Divine Seed blooms, and out comes Juno-Seto, who has been reborn, and for some reason has all of her power and memories. Now, all of her power, I guess, isn't the best way to explain it, because though she does have her memories, it kind of talks throughout her lore and in Aimhyr lore as well, that as she manifests more and more on Aimhyr, her power begins to return to her. So she's not at her full capability. And, she's at higher capability than most people because she's a divine, extremely powerful goddess with the power to create entire worlds, but she's not at full capacity at this point. So she continues to gain power as she exists on Aimhyr, and I'll let you take it away from there, Faf.
From where? I have no idea where you just
Oh, I'm sorry. So I left you off at Juno-Seto has come out of the divine seed and has all of her memories and most of her power.
She then becomes one of the Tetrad Arcadia, takes a region, and starts to rebuild life there. And over time, I don't really know how much time passes. I guess from Ensa's eyes, it was in a few moments, but Ensa's sense of everything is warped.
Yeah.
Ensa eventually comes to Aimhyr with the goal of not only conquering it, but also to settle this sense of unease that she feels. And Ensa then proceeds to ravage the plane, dealing pretty extreme damage to the Veil, massive damage to Juno's area, and being completely ineffectual at doing anything to Nan's area. And I guess Sovinar's area didn't care because they were all underwater.
Yeah. And before you continue, I just wanted to jump in, and I feel like it's important that we talk about what Ensa is because it does pertain to Sero as well, which we'll get into later. Do you mind if I just hop into that real quick and explain it shortly?
Go for it.
So, when Juno is holding back the ravaging void, and Zeruiah and the people and the animals and everything escape, that portal closes, and Juno's body is literally destroyed by the ravaging void. And I use the term destroyed very loosely because it's not actually ripped apart, destroyed, disintegrated, anything like that. But instead, the ravaging void actually takes over her body, fills her body, and essentially becomes Ensa-Taya. Ensa-Taya is Juno's old body, but filled with the power and maliciousness and, overarching need for destruction of the ravaging void itself. And essentially that's what Ensa is. And since Ensa has basically the same body as Juno, it's almost that paradoxical existence, which is why she feels that sense of unease. Because she is actually experiencing Juno's life, but she isn't, Juno. So it creates that sort of sense of a rift in your soul almost that, we'll explain more in Saskia lore because that soul rift comes up again. But I feel like that should be explained in terms of Ensa because that does hold prevalence to Sero-Anya, which we will see later.
Yeah.
So the first thing that we can hop into is basically... I'll let you start, but the opening of what happens in Aimhyr in episode 1, just that first part.
Episode 1 of what?
Of Fates of the Fallen.
Starts in Everlasting Embrace.
Sorry, I figured we would do Fates of the Fallen, and then we can do another episode on Everlasting Embrace. Like I said, the Star Wars approach.
Okay. Not the Star Wars approach where Mark Hamill looks really disappointed in the camera and then fades out of his cloak, right?
I mean, I really hope that doesn't turn out, but if this episode doesn't turn out well, it might,
Alright, I'm just gonna go ahead and phase out of my clothes. Okay.
Oh, fuck. Now Fafnir's doing the podcast naked. Alright, so we can start with episode 1 and what goes down in that episode.
Not much. Episode 1 is based around Sero, and she basically wakes up surrounded by little void creatures, which she is not happy with. She just sort of slaps them away. She has no idea what's going on. She's seeing memories in her head of what happened. She's seeing two people fight in her mind that she knows and yet can't recall their names, which are Juno and Ensa. Yep. And eventually she ends up awaking from her night. She sees Zeruiah in her nightmares, ends up accidentally killing Zeruiah in her nightmares, and then wakes up in a small town, and a voice in her head tells her to go find Juno. And then it tells her to go find Zeruiah. Juno in her head tells her to go find Zeruiah.
Yeah.
And Sero has this really cute moment where because she's a little kid, she can't actually pronounce Zeruia's name. So she just calls her Zeru, which is...
It's pretty cute.
That's what we call her, so I guess Gumi knows.
Yeah, Gumi knows what's up. So at this point, I believe she's headed to find Zeruia and instead sort of stumbles across Tavarius, correct?
That takes a long time.
Well, yeah, I figure she's searching for a while.
Yeah, she's searching for a while, but her search doesn't come back into play until episode 5.
Yeah.
So if we're gonna go by the timeline,
yeah, if we want to go,
we can just say that Sero is effectively out of the plot for a while she does her search.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah. Also, because Tev hasn't even begun looking for her at this point, that happens later.
Yeah. Okay.
Awesome.
All right, so we've covered that. Episode 1. What else goes down?
That is episode 1. Are we doing episode 2 now?
I feel like we should just do all 9 episodes, since if we're going at this pace, it probably won't take terribly long. And then afterward, we can kind of decide if we want to go more in-depth on some of these characters, because, we do have these whole built-out lore documents, which are on the wiki now, by the way. If you guys go to the character pages for any of the Aimhyr characters, Fafnir and I have created wiki pages with all of their lore for you to read.
Yeah, including Q-Tong's incredibly depressing lore.
Yeah, true.
She just can't have love.
It's true. Poor thing.
Alright, so episode 2 is a Balefire episode.
Ugh, fuck.
Which everyone loves.
I fucking hate Balefire so much.
Is out and about with his Fey fire and is approached by the Naga, taken to Cerinthus' temple, where he manages to royally piss off the guard.
Yeah. Essentially.
In general. And then he, well, actually, no. That already happened before this. This was in Drowning Darkness. He managed to royally piss off the Naga.
Yeah, true.
The Naga were already pissed at him at this point.
Yeah. Everyone's pissed at Balefire. Fuck that guy.
Yeah. So Balefire has to deal with the fallout from the Naga for a while, and eventually Zeruia comes across him, who is none too pleased that, they have decided to, tear into the Veil.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a short battle with no clear victor. Balefire is on his knees and tells Zeruia that he saw Sero, and who felt like one of those goddesses who he never met, but I guess saw from a distance.
Something like that, yeah.
And this stuns Zeruia long enough for Balefire to cut off one of her horns and then just basically run away.
Yeah, pretty much.
Zeruia's like, I've got better things to do if there is a reincarnation of Juno walking around, so I'm going to go try and find her.
Is it right now that Balefire also stabs himself with said horn?
That's at the start of episode 3.
Okay. Couldn't remember when exactly that happened, but God, it's so fucking ridiculous. I hate that guy so much.
Speaking of which, episode 3 is a Zeruia episode.
It is.
At the start of the episode, Balefire stabs himself with Zeruia's horn to create a wound that will never be able to heal, so that he can claim that the Guardian of the Veil attacked him because she is corrupt, and then rally the people against her. Before any of this happens, Zeruia meets up with Tavarius and tells him to go find Juno, the reincarnation of Juno.
Mm-hmm.
And he does that, only for the Veil to immediately be attacked, and things are starting to burn.
Yeah, basically. One thing that I feel like we should mention is, even though it's an everlasting embrace thing, just what the Fey Fire is and how Balefire got it, because I feel like that's very pertinent to, his development as the greatest dick in Brave Frontier history.
Okay.
You mind if I take this one?
The Fey Fire is a mystical fire passed down by the Fey, which is how it got its name.
Yeah, basically.
It can burn through corruption and basically everything, and I don't think it can ever really be put out.
Mm-hmm.
and it can only be gifted, never taken away. So Zeruiah gives Balefur the Fey Fire, the start of everlasting embrace, in an attempt to give him the power to assist in the upcoming war when Ensa is ravaging the plane.
Yeah.
And he just straight up disregards this. Like, he goes into her forest to attempt to cleanse the corruption there. Ends up cleansing the corruption, yes, but also ends up burning down her forest in the process, which was entirely intentional on his part.
Yeah, he's just
Like,
a real piece of shit. He just kind of receives this gift and then goes, wow, thanks for the gift. That will help me protect my people. Fuck you. And then burns down the forest. So,
or at least that part of it.
yeah.
And then Balefur sees Juno and Ensa fighting from a distance and is like, I'm not getting near that.
Yeah, fuck this shit. I am out. He was not a fan.
I'm not getting near that.
I wouldn't
So,
either. Honestly, do not fuck with that.
yeah. He that's the one semi-sensible thing that he
Yeah.
did, even though for all intents and purposes, like, he should have just gone. He had the summoner. Come on.
Yeah.
Summoner
Yeah.
was just tagging along with Balefur, like, wow.
Yeah, like
You're an asshole.
Yeah. Summoner, I don't even know why Summoner was tagging along. Summoner should have just assessed the fact that Balefur's a real piece of shit and then handled it from there. But
Summoner was tagging along because when Tillith brought him into the gate to Everlasting Embrace, she put him amongst the humans of that area. And the only notable human around is Balefur.
I honestly wish so much that Summoner was the one to just fucking brutalize Balefur. But regardless, we should continue. But yeah, just let it suffice to say that I hate Balefur.
Yeah. So this proves, like, to be hilariously ineffective. Well, it's effective at burning the forest in the short term, but Zeruiah's combat prowess outstrips the humans several thousand times over, to the point where even when, and I'm not even making this up, even when one of the troops on the enemy side is Megumine, they still cannot win.
Mm-hmm. Explosion.
Like, I'm not even joking. There is a character that shows up in the battles who starts charging an explosion attack, and they just can't.
Yeah.
They gain no headway. They just lose.
They were like really shitty Bakugo.
And then, like, Zeruiah just starts skewering all of the humans who are attacking her forest, and then summoning the spirits of the forest to, like, grab people with trees and smack them into the ground. Just a whole bunch of brutalizing all around.
Much deserved.
And during all of this, by sending his army off to get absolutely murdered by the Veil, Balefur puts his real plan in action, which is mass regicide.
Yeah.
Basically. This is shown in Everlasting Embrace. Balefur is a member of an old noble house that was destroyed through petty squabbles between, it's just the standard plot.
Yeah, just the standard monarchy bullshit.
Think Game of Thrones, except if, well, no, everyone is an asshole in Game of Thrones nowadays, aren't they?
Think Game of Thrones.
Season 8 proved that, and no one is a good person.
Basically, yeah. I mean, and Balefur's family is killed while this happens. And Balefur basically just goes, oh, well, fuck the nobles, fuck everybody, I'm just going to be pissed. And spends the entirety of his storyline being pissed at literally anyone that he is capable of being pissed at.
His solution is to go on a holy crusade to kill literally all of the nobles, as well as literally all of the people in the town, because they did not, stop his house from being destroyed.
Yeah.
So he just starts killing everyone because he thinks they're all guilty. And so does his guard. And that leads us that's the plot of episode 4. It's another Balefur episode where he just starts killing everyone.
Yeah, he
Until
loses it.
Zeruiah shows
He's
up.
taking the Fey Fire to the villages that his own people, human beings, live in, and he is just willy-nilly killing people, burning down. I mean, this is like some fucking Seal fan levels of absolute genocide. Just lighting things on fire, burning things to the ground, doesn't care who he's killing, women, children, parents, doesn't matter. He'll kill them. It's fucking wild.
We're not quite at Seal fan levels yet. See, Seal fan commits mass genocide for a purpose.
True.
Which he will go to any length to fulfill.
Well, Balefur will go to any length to fulfill the prophecy of him being a monstrous piece of shit. But it's not quite as pseudo-noble as Sealfan's purpose was.
At least Sealfan was trying to accomplish something.
Yeah.
Balefur just wanted to kill people.
God, I hate him so much.
Satisfy his itch.
Yeah.
Which I don't think would have worked anyway.
Yeah. I don't think it would have worked either.
Zeruiah shows up amidst all of this and is understandably very, very angry. And Balefur challenges Zeruiah, and there's a slight power gap between someone who just learned how to use a mystical fire and someone who has spent millennia perfecting battle knowledge.
Yeah.
And protecting the Veil from humans.
And before we power scale Brave Frontier.
Yeah.
But yeah, Zeruiah is exponentially more powerful than Balefur is, because he's honestly like a young human, and Zeruiah has lived for longer than we can imagine, because we know that she's been around for a long ass time on our plane, and that doesn't even take into account her lore, which states that she's from another plane of existence like Juno. So it's fucking wild.
Basically, Balefur dies, and then Zeruiah gets stuck in like a loop of being happy. Like, Balefur had to be killed, but this is really upsetting.
Yeah, like, I don't really know why it affected her so greatly, but she is a very, peaceful person, because she feels the need to keep the peace and things like that, and therefore she basically gets PTSD from killing Balefur.
It's because of Erwin. She promised Erwin,
yeah, you're right,
that she would give humans a chance,
mm-hmm.
and she didn't. She just went and killed them all.
I mean, she gave them a chance, and then they started burning down their own villages. I feel like that's enough of a chance, but not in Zeruiah logic. So essentially, she gets PTSD from killing Balefur and betraying her promise to Erwin, and is essentially doomed to relive that moment.
Yes.
So yeah, that's great.
So that's over. Balefur is now dead.
Thank God.
Now we move into episode 5, which is
that's another Sero episode, right?
Is it? No. Episode 6 is a Sero
Okay,
episode.
You're right. My bad.
I think episode 5 might be a Tavarius episode.
Oh, is that when Tavarius meets up with Zeruiah? And Zeruiah tells him to go find Sero? When is that?
No, that occurs at the end of episode 6.
God, this chronology is so difficult.
No. Tavarius has already been told by Zeruiah to go find Sero.
Okay.
Back in episode 2. So or episode 3. He's already gone out and done that.
Yeah.
So Tavarius, long story short, meets up with Sero.
Mm-hmm.
I guess they fight off some Naga.
Yeah.
I don't really recall the plot of... Oh, and I think they have to fight off a Wolf's Eye guard as well.
Which is a joke. Like, the Wolf's Eye guard, I'm sorry, are a fucking joke.
Wait, no. Episode 5 isn't any of that. Episode 5 is a Sorrenthus episode.
Oh, God. Okay, you're right. Yeah, that's the one where he rescues the people.
Sorrenthus sees people getting attacked by the Wolf's Eye guard who are still alive, and decides to protect them so that he can take them into his fold and, turn them into Naga.
Yeah.
which he does swimmingly. He effectively commands you act on behalf of the Naga in this, where you have to kill the enemies, but the wolf's eye, but not at all hit the villagers who are attempting to escape, which can be tricky. Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
this. And then they take them and turn them into Nagas, make them worship
It's
Sovenar.
not. It's
And I think
implied that
that,
they turn into Naga, right? I don't think we
yeah,
directly see it, but yeah,
no, we
it's
don't. But
basically what happens.
Sorrentis has a brief conversation with Sovenar, who
Mhm.
basically Sovenar acts sort of like a spoiled child, and Sorrentis is like, "But I love you," and she's like, "Silence."
Yeah, basically. Sylvanar is a bit much.
Yeah.
Does
And
anything
then
else occur in episode
episode
5?
6 happens,
Okay,
in
yeah.
which all of the events occur at once.
Basically.
So, in this episode, because a lot of things happen at once, and like the passage of time just gets kind of warped here in terms
Yeah.
of how far people travel.
Mhm.
Uh, Tavarius meets up with Sero, who they have a. Tavarius was like, "I was sent here by Zeruiah,"
Mhm.
and Sero's like, "Well, I'm looking for Zeru. What's your name?" And he's like, "I'm Tavarius," and she's like, "I can't pronounce that. You're now Tevi
Yeah,
or
basically.
Tev."
She
And
calls him
then
Tev or Tevi. You there?
Sero
Oh, there you go.
has more nightmares, this time involving Balefear and Alram
Mhm.
from Everlasting Embrace, even though she's never met either of them.
Mhm.
Uh, and then Sero meets up with Zeruiah over in the Vale, and Juno takes over and kind of wipes the blood off of Zeru's face, giving her some semblance of sanity, I guess.
Yeah, she just basically holds her and comforts her and cleans Balefear's blood off of her face.
Yep. And then Zeru tells them, "Go to Nan's pagoda.
Mhm.
I'm gonna lie down for a little bit." And then we never see Zeru
Yeah,
again.
and essentially the reason she tells them to go to Nan's pagoda is because Nan is also a member of the Tetrad Arcadia, sorry, and is Nan's pagoda is essentially the safest place on Aimhyr right now.
Yeah.
So they head that
So
way,
they
and I.
manage to wait. They end off the episode with them
Mhm.
going to Nan's pagoda, and then at the start of episode 7, they're just there in the
Well, you forgot
gates.
about the fight with the Naga Leviathan.
That okay, but
Um,
doesn't that occur at the start of? No, that occurs at the end of episode 6. You're right.
yeah, so I'll go ahead and explain that one because it's one of my favorites. Is so basically what we end up seeing is they have to fight this huge stupid OP like Naga Leviathan. It's basically a huge Naga who has the ability to control minor, storm like hurricane things that, without realizing that, Tavarius does that but better, so fuck you. And essentially, this is the part where Sero-Anya manifests Ensa-Taya for the first time, correct?
Yes.
And kind of just absolutely ravages, no pun intended, the Naga Leviathan, and Tavarius manages to take the Naga Leviathan storms that it's creating and redirect it toward the Leviathan itself, essentially knocking it off of a cliff. And Sero-Anya, who has been taken over by Ensa-Taya, screams, "And make sure you kill it," as it, falls over the edge of the giant cliff, which would kill it. And Tavarius is like, okay, what the fuck? And as Ensa-Taya sort of unmanifests from Sero-Anya's body, Sero collapses right by the edge of the cliff, and Tavarius catches her before she falls off the edge.
Yup.
And that's essentially what happens at the very end of episode 6.
Episode 7 opens with them still at the door, with the Naga still in pursuit,
Mm-hmm.
and Tev is basically having a moment and like, "Let me in,
Yeah.
let me in,"
Shaking
and
on the door,
just
trying to kick it
opens.
down.
They try and kick down the door, and the door just opens before they can.
Yep. It's like a fucking Looney Tunes moment.
Nan lets them in, and is none too pleased with them,
Mm-hmm.
especially with Sero in particular, because she's a very I don't want to say elitist, but she's very much we don't or not racist either, but she's very much we don't serve your kind around
Yeah,
here
she's
in
only
regards to
concerned with the
Sero.
safety of her own people.
Yeah, she's concerned with only the safety of her own people and her pagoda, so
Mm-hmm.
she's like none too pleased that the conflict has been brought to her doorstep.
Mm-hmm.
Tev, of course, is doesn't really like this standpoint and tries to fight Nan, which is ineffective, and then Nan sees this and tries to get Saskia to eliminate uh, Sero and Tev, which doesn't work
Yes.
because A, Saskia doesn't want to do that, and B, you ripped all of the malice out of her, so anything
Yeah.
that would have made her want to do it is no longer there.
I feel like now is a good time to cover the Saskia and non lore since we said we would. Just that we
Okay.
kind of have a small amount of backstory. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up my document that, I wrote up and is now on the wiki if you guys want to go check it out because, that's a thing now. Thanks to Lena for helping me put that all together. Okay, so we'll start with, I guess, non lore since that's the most important pertaining to Saskia. So essentially, all that really matters in terms of backstory is that her name is Nan Wong Mu. I think that's how it's pronounced. Sorry if I butchered that. But basically, Nan is. She used to be a relatively weak and innocent dragonfly fairy known as Nanhua. And Nanhua was framed as basically the culprit for a crime. And in response, the higher ups who framed her stole her vision, right? So she can no longer see anything, and imprisoned her in a cage made of jade. And this is where it gets kind of fucky because essentially, without us knowing how, everyone figures out that she was framed, and their belief in her causes her spiritual power to grow, which gives her the ability to control the Jean Kui, I believe it's called. And basically, she just grows more and more powerful until she becomes accepted as the queen mother of the non-Jean. I can't pronounce any of this, by the way. I'm sure it's terrible. But she becomes the queen mother, Nan Wang Mu, and essentially she can control this Jean Kui, which manifests itself as the ability to create any shape out of jade. So she can, sort of throw spears made of jade or lock someone in a jade cage, things like that. So that's her ability. And she becomes the leader of the, non-Jean. Fuck me, dude, I can't pronounce any of this. They're basically a group of really powerful warrior monks, which Saskia was a member of. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Saskia was a member of I wouldn't really call it a tribe of monks.
Yeah, they're warrior monks. As
Saskia was very much a warmongering person.
Mm-hmm.
She just wanted to destroy and conquer.
Yeah,
and then
basically.
she came into contact with Nan, and I guess Nan exorcised the
essentially
bloodlust
her tribe leader begged Nan for help because they couldn't control Saskia and was afraid that she would become a tyrant. And so they asked Nan to help, and Nan went, yeah, fuck it, I guess I can do something. And just sort of came over, and then no one knows what happened except Nan and Saskia. But Nan basically exorcised the malice out of her and sent her malice to the DU, which is referenced actually as two different things. Because in Saskia's lore, the DU is the River of the Dead that separates our world from, or their, Aimhyr from the underworld, and in Nan's lore, the DU is just the underworld. So that makes sense.
Which is apparently under her pagoda, because why not?
Because why the fuck not? And something notable about Saskia is after she has her malice removed from her, she's essentially docile, but it causes what I referred to earlier in terms of Juno and Ensa. It causes a soul rift, which basically means that it's not really explained upon other than it makes it difficult for Saskia to exist in the land of the living, aka Aimhyr. So she is forced to stay at Nan's pagoda as her assistant, and she literally her job is to do what, if you guys have ever heard of, what's his name? Charon. he's from the Greek mythos. She just rows people across the DU. She takes souls down the DU, rows a boat, drops them off in the underworld, and comes back. It's basically based on Charon from the Greek mythos, who just rows dead souls across the river Styx, which is also what the DU is. So that's pretty much your short Saskia and non-backstory, so enjoy.
There's your short backstory. Here's fun and joy.
Basically, yeah. So at this point, sort of, Tavarius and Non bicker like fucking children, and then after they're done being children, I'm sorry. After they're done being children, Saskia, Sero-Anya, and Juno-Seto, I almost said, and Tavarius head down to the DU in order to, I guess, tame their more violent sides. At the same time, Nan is sort of keeping an eye on the overwhelming amount of Naga appearing outside of her pagoda, while Cerinthus is kind of just outside taunting her, being a general nuisance.
I'd like to think that for the purposes of the plot, that Cerinthus is just there. Like, he's spending this time wisely. He's trying to find a way to get through the pagoda, and he does find a way, which is shown at the end of episode 7.
Yeah.
But we're not quite there yet.
So, just because Ingram said it, he said Saskia does it to get her soul back. It's kind of like that, but it's her shadow. So it's part of her soul. It's the dissonance between the good side of her and that bloodthirsty evil side. And the bloodthirsty evil side has all of the power, and it's stuck in the DU. So Saskia, Sero-Anya, and Tavarius go down there so that Saskia can tame her shadow and gain her strength and power back, because she was once the greatest warrior in all of Aimhyr, according to her tribe. And Sero goes down there to basically come to terms with Ensa-Taya, to enlist her help and try to sort of offer an olive branch of, like, stop fucking with me, right?
Anyone who knows Ensa's lore should respond to this with a J.K. Simmons laugh.
Yeah, basically. So they go down there. Saskia basically tames her shadow, through the power of friendship and anime willpower. And Sero-Anya says, I'm sorry, I'm reading Twitch chat at the same time. Yeah, so Saskia gets her punchy girl abilities back, and Sero-Anya talks to Ensa. And Ensa goes, yeah, of course I'll help you. But, things aren't always as they seem, especially with Ensa-Taya. And so, at this point, they are kind of taming their shit, and they've got their stuff together, and the Naga start to make their way into the DU. There's, like, a few making their way in, and they're like, oh shit, they're going for the waters of the DU. And the DU is called the River of the Dead for a reason, because anything that touches its water instantaneously dies. This does not affect the Naga. And so, I'll let you take it away from here, Faf, because I'm kind of rusty on what their plan was with the DU, but I know there was something there.
Okay, so, to put it very simply, the DU acts as the river DU acts as a spiritual conduit to which the souls flow to the underworld. They know that in order to get their precious goddess Sovenar to be able to leave the abyss, that she needs the power of dead souls. So this is an extremely easy way to get them. So they start channeling this energy to not only power them up, but also to try and bring out Sovenar. And Saskia and Sero pretty much instantly realize that this is going on. And so does Nan, although this is the point at which, for all intents and purposes, basically Nan glaring angrily down from her pagoda, while Cerinthus just sort of stares up at her, like, grinning like an idiot.
Essentially, yes. We have to mention that Nan's magic is useless against Cerinthus.
Yep.
So, she just basically, her jade spears and all that shit don't do anything to him.
Yep. Episode 8 is, I believe, a Tavarius episode.
Yeah, basically.
And
It's a good one too.
Basically, they teleport out of the DU. Uh, Saskia embraces her killer side a little bit and then starts killing Naga.
And I mean fucking
Sero
killing
goes
Naga. Like
full
she's going
Insa
through
on
punching
another
the shit out of
subsect
him.
of the Naga and then starts killing everything. Nan provides backup support from her little corner, and Tavarius just takes on Sorrentus and eventually manages to kill him.
Yeah.
But in the act of Sorrentus's death, Sovenar is revived and basically stabbed straight through Tavarius, who
Mm-hmm.
gets very emotional and then swears vengeance on everyone there.
Yeah. Before you continue, I just wanted to mention one thing, which is I think the best part of episode 8, which is how Tavarius kills Sorrenthus,
Okay.
because he essentially so Tavarius is for those of you who don't know a literal ancient storm dragon in the form of a human being, right? So or a humanoid being at least. And essentially what he does is he just goes, all right, fuck it, and just dive bombs Sorrenthus with this gigantic blast of lightning, basically piercing through him and just absolutely destroying him. And then Sorrenthus just kind of lays there dying. And I think it's awesome because it just shows the absolute power of Tavarius, and I think they did him really dirty, just absolutely getting wrecked by Sovenar right after. But regardless, it was a really cool way for Sorrenthus to die.
Yep.
Because fuck Sorrenthus, that guy was kind of a dick. So now we
Now
can
we
move on to
get
episode
into
9.
now we get into a theme that has been sort of lying in the background in episode 9, but
Mm-hmm.
we see it in full form here. So I'm going to be saying this a lot, and this will be clear why later.
Mm-hmm.
Sovenar copes with the loss of Sorrenthus by starting to rage across all of Aimhyr and causing massive storms and stuff.
Yeah.
Uh, Sero copes with the loss of Tavarius
Mm-hmm.
through at first disbelief and then anger,
Mm-hmm.
manifesting Ensa in the flesh, separate from Sero, to
Yeah.
fight
She literally
Sovenar,
revives
and then
her.
later Juno as well.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Nan ends up getting stabbed through at one point during this ordeal and dying, leaving just Sero and her, I guess, doppelgangers at this point
Mm-hmm.
to fight an increasingly erratic Sovenar. Eventually, Sero ends up fusing with her two other halves to form the Eternal Light, and then basically ascends, and then offers Sovenar her hand, and
Mm-hmm.
Sovenar takes it willingly and leaves her mortal coil, and they both leave Aimhyr basically.
Yeah.
Well, except for Sovenar's body, that just sort of crumples lifelessly in the ground, so that the Nagas can waste their time trying to bring their, uh, their goddess back.
Yeah.
And then we get a montage scene once that's all over.
Mm-hmm.
We see the Earth trying to cope with the loss of two of its great powers, Juno and uh, Sovenar.
Mm-hmm.
We see the humans trying to cope with the loss of a majority of their armies,
Mm-hmm.
and
And
of
Balefear.
course Balefear, although I don't think anyone's particularly feeling bad about the loss of Balefear after what he tried to do.
Yeah, fuck that guy.
We see Zeruiah slowly coming to terms with what she's done
Mm-hmm.
and trying to regain herself as she knows herself. We see Nan trying to cope with the loss of Saskia, who sacrificed herself to bring her back from the DU.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we see Tavarius trying to cope with the loss of Sero. And then finally, we see the Eternal Light, who has been narrating everything throughout all of the episodes and just sort of briefly talks, says that they're sad that they had to leave Aimhyr.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they say that maybe one day they'll go back, but not right now.
Yeah.
And then they say that something else is watching and that they're facing
Kindred.
it forward because they are kindred. And then
Mm-hmm.
kindred is written in like mild Zalgo text because Sero is very much a being of intense strength.
Yeah. Um, So a couple things that I just wanted to mention, just because I'm super into, I can't logistically say a little bit because that's a lie. I'm super into the theoretical tie-ins that exist between different pieces of lore and also things that exist in the real world that these characters are based off of. And so, if Fafnir, if you're okay with it, I'd like to take maybe 5 minutes to kind of talk about those tie-ins between Sero-Anya, Ensa-Taya, the Ravaging Void, Kranis, all that stuff.
Go for it.
As pertains to Aimhyr, at least. We won't get into the Giselle stuff right now, though I'd love to at some point. Maybe I will, because people have wanted to hear it. But I can give a TLDR on that, and we'll see. So the first thing that I wanted to mention that I really like is that the first piece of Sero-Anya's name, the Sero part of it, actually comes from the Latin term Sero, which, is Sero. And it means to bring together or intertwine, which I find very interesting because Sero-Anya is almost a conglomeration of herself, Juno-Seto, and Ensa-Taya, especially so when she becomes the Eternal Light. So that's the first cool part, is that her name is kind of based off of an old Latin verb, which means to bring together or intertwine. Now we can sort of get into these more interesting theoretical tie-ins that we see. First of all, the first one is that when Sero-Anya is taken over by Ensa-Taya, the flower in her hair changes, the one right by the little butterfly and stuff, and she gains the power to control the Ravaging Void. Alongside this flower's color is the exact same color scheme as Kranis, which is interesting because I believe that lends credence to the idea that Kranis, when given sentience by Gazia, he was originally a sliver of the Ravaging Void. And the Ravaging Void is what Kranis came from, in my opinion.
Not the Ravaging Void specifically.
Yeah, but the void that the Ravaging Void is born of. Also,
we don't know that much either, but
yeah, this is my theory. When Sero-Anya becomes the Eternal Light, the cadence and phrasing of her sentences appear to match the narrator of Grand Quest Fates of the Fallen, as well as Everlasting Embrace, which leads me to believe that the Eternal Light is the narrator, and while it's heavily implied, it's not fully confirmed, so I do consider that theoretical. And then lastly, something interesting that I think is we actually don't know where Sero-Anya came from. She just kind of wakes up after, it's 3 years ish after Juno and Ensa have the big hug.
Yeah, 3 years.
Which creates this huge crystalline spire, which almost leads me to wonder if that was the birthplace of Sero-Anya, kind of that merging of the light and darkness. So those are kind of my theoretical pieces when it comes to Sero-Anya. I especially like that there's really that implication of Kranis being part of that because of that flower in her hair turning the same color as Kranis.
Yep.
So that's kind of all I have for Aimhyr right now. So I'll let you wrap it up, and then I guess we can do our little Giselle Kranis Easter egg.
Yep.
People have demanded it.
I don't really have too much to add to that. I mean, I feel like this isn't definitely the last we've seen of the Eternal Light, especially because Gumi is still releasing more Aimhyr lore after this, which we will get to.
Yeah.
But I feel like the lore behind Sero is super interesting because at the end of the day, this is Sero's story.
Yeah.
And this is also a story about coping with loss and I guess the different stages of grief for that. But the only character that we really get to see go through all of the stages of loss is ironically Sovenar.
Mm-hmm.
She's the only one who goes through denial, anger, bargaining through the course of her fight, depression, why am I even here, why was I given emotion, and then acceptance when she ascends with Sero. She is the only character on screen to actually go through all of those 5 stages, which is a nice touch.
It was a nice touch. I don't usually get invested too terribly in a storyline in Brave Frontier, but this one definitely captured my attention to the nth degree, which is why I've worked so hard to create all of this comprehensive lore and the wiki pages, and worked so hard with Faf to really understand what happened in Aimhyr. And I'll take the time on stream, on video, to thank Faf for the incredible amounts of hard work that he's put in to help brief me on what happened, because otherwise I would have no idea what the fuck is going on right now.
You're very welcome.
Thanks, man. As promised, I said I'd do it. I'll hold true to my word. Here's the Krannis-Giselle connection that I myself have come up with.
Oh boy.
So the first part that we need to understand is the hierarchy of gods in H.P. Lovecraft. Now, even before that, the first thing that we have to mention is that Giselle's entire character, lore, kit, all of that is based off of H.P. Lovecraft. And a huge shout out to Catface for making the original connection, because I would not have been able to come up with any of this without her. So thank you very much. So first of all, Giselle's extra skill is called Whisper in the Dark, right? So, or Whisper in the Darkness, and it's based off of an H.P. Lovecraft novella by the same name. And in this H.P. Lovecraft novella, it's actually about essentially aliens who come and steal bodies and take them back to their planet, right? Which isn't necessarily important, but I just think it's interesting. So there's that. There's her last name, Tindalos, which is a reference to the Hounds of Tindalos, which is also an H.P. Lovecraft tie-in. And then there's like Angles of Time, I believe is her BB, or something like that. Which again is a reference to Lovecraft. It's Lovecraft all the way down, right? So we can reasonably assume that there is a lot of Lovecraft going on in here, and which made me wonder, is that the tie-in that she has with Krannis, and is that the reason that she DBBs with him? Because everyone else who has a DBB has some thematic connection.
Except for fucking Vanilla and Anoko.
Which I wonder if we'll get one, but I kind of doubt it. So the first thing that we have to mention is that Giselle's sphere is called Reparatrice, which means the repairer. And Reparatrice has a very interesting flavor text to it as its sphere lore. One specific part of that flavor text says this: "You're not quite sure why such an innocuous item would provoke anxiety, but suddenly you hear it. Vague strains of flutes playing the same thin, monotonous tone, accompanied by a slow drum beat that seems to mimic the living pulse of something far beyond your knowledge." Now, that may sound like a really cool flavor text, but that struck a chord when I read that. I said, that sounds so fucking familiar. And so I went to look, and the first thing before I get into this is that, again, we have to understand the hierarchy of gods in H.P. Lovecraft. The hierarchy goes like this. The top are called outer gods. Outer gods are the creators of everything. They exist outside of our universe and permeate everything in between universes and dimensions. Born of the outer gods, essentially their children are the great old ones, like Cthulhu. I'm sure you've heard of Cthulhu, all that stuff. Really cool story. If you haven't read it, go check out The Call of Cthulhu. It's great. And then below them are the high priests, the people who communicate with those gods in order to spread their word. Now, something that's only mentioned briefly and in a couple of cases is an outer god called Ensa-Taya. And Ensa-Taya is essentially, and you might get Krannis vibes from this, a mindless consuming void. It just sort of exists and permeates within all things that there is space. So Ensa-Taya is literally what Krannis came from in my theory. And so the interesting part about this connection here is what H.P. Lovecraft has written about Ensa-Taya. Outside the ordered universe is that amorphous blight of nethermost confusion which blasphemes and bubbles at the center of all infinity. The boundless demon sultan Ensa-Taya, whose name no lips dare speak aloud, and who gnaws hungrily in inconceivable, unlighted chambers beyond time and space, amidst the muffled, maddening beat, ready, of vile drums and thin, monotonous whine of accursed flutes, which is essentially exactly what is said in Giselle's sphere lore, which leads me to believe that we should be viewing Krannis as Ensa-Taya, this thing that exists outside of everything, that permeates all things where there is space and is just completely unknowable, which is exactly what is stated.
Also, that thing now resides in our head.
Exactly. Krannis is now in your mind, just like Krannis was in the mind of Dragar. Here's another interesting thing. Dragar was driven insane by the existence of Krannis within his mind, because from my theory, he had full awareness of what Krannis came from, which is exactly what happens to anyone in the H.P. Lovecraft mythos who knows what Azathoth is. It drives them to pure insanity, which is exactly what happened to Dragar, which again leads me to believe that there's another theoretical connection there. Last but not least, the reason I think that there's sort of that connection there is, again, Giselle has a lot of tie-ins to an outer god called Shub-Niggurath, right? And the main tie-in there is in her lore, where it says that she seems to be everywhere at once, and it's almost like her dress is covered in eyes. And Shub-Niggurath is also said to be all-seeing and everywhere at once. She's also worshipped by a race called the Shoggoth, which is funny because Giselle keeps something called I believe a Shoggoth as a pet, which is
Frenzied
another
Shoggoth.
tie-in. Yeah. And so on top of all of that, we just see way too many tie-ins here for this to be any sort of coincidence. And I really think that we should be viewing Kranis as that kind of existence that permeates all things. The last thing that I want to tie this into is that I believe that we see an entire connection of Oribus lore here. Because we see that, for those of you who don't know, there were the Oribus units, Durum, Seofan, Galea, Laressa, all that stuff, right? And then there's the Vardket, who were the gods that basically these Oribus units worshipped. And so I believe that the tie-in goes, outer gods are the seventh circle fiends, the Vardket are the great old ones, and the high priests are the Oribus units. The reason I think this, again, that the Vardket are the great old ones, is because they fear this guy named the Dust Yellow King. You can read more about that, or hear more about it, when we do the Oribus lore episode, which I promise will come eventually. But I find this interesting because there is actually a great old one who is said to be the strongest and greatest of the great old ones, called the Yellow King. His name is also known as Hastur, Hastur, so we'll see if the next unit that we see is named that, because if it is, then we have a tie-in. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much for listening to my Kranis Giselle insanity rant. If you have any questions, please, I beg of you, leave them in the YouTube comments. I always love responding to those comments. And thank you so much for tuning in. I want to see if Fafnir has any closing words before we really end this stuff. So,
Fucking chicken.
fucking chicken. I believe that we should end every episode with fucking chicken. It's just such a great ending, you know?
We gotta cut it out of the YouTube video.
Man, okay. All right. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. I really appreciate it. Leave any comments, questions, feedback, anything like that down in the description, and I will catch you